So thanks, Maureen, for joining me today to talk about life stories and to contribute to our film conversations about life stories. I'd like to start by asking you just to talk about yourself, or introduce yourself, your role, your creative practice.
Ooh, that's big. Yeah. I have to give a talk later this month at Concordia, so it's good practice.
Good practice.
Good. Yeah. I'm Maureen Bradley, aka Mo Bradley. I'm a media artist, filmmaker. Started in filmmaking through music. I was in a bunch of not very good bands and made music videos and then activist videos. So as I was playing around experimenting with cameras back in the 80s when I was an undergrad student, I had a camera one day when there was a big demo outside the Station 10 in Montreal downtown, and the police started beating up my friends. So I filmed it, and that was kind of the beginning of what I started doing. So I work mostly in single channel work, documentary, narrative, experimental, whatever the heck that means, non-narrative. But yeah, I've done installation work as well, worked with 16 millimeter hand processing, all sorts of different mediums. And, really, I think what got me interested in telling stories on the screen or deconstructing things on the screen was, in the 80s when there were no cell phones and we had centralized media and no social media.
Oh, it's so hard to remember back to that.
I know, can you imagine?
It's so recent, and yet it
recent.
seems so distant.
Yeah, to be able to get your hands on the means of production was a big deal. And I understood that. I didn't really see people on TV that I felt were like me or represented my reality. And I wanted to change the world. And so I knew one way to do that was to be able to tell the right stories, because I was only seeing a certain kind of story, the kind of dominant culture, mainstream story on TV and popular movies. But I used to go when I was a teenager with friends, but sometimes just by myself, to the local rep theater in NDG, Cinema 5, which is long gone, and just watch, Fellini films or, Nouvelle Vague films. But I think the biggest influence was Divine. I remember this one week where they had a film, and they had the smell-o-rama.
Yeah.
I can't remember which film had the smell-o-rama, and of course it was like John Waters. All the smell-o-rama was really vile, unpleasant things. But I couldn't get enough of those John Waters films, and I it's funny. I wonder where people sit with him today, because I think our culture today is so easily offended. And he was always pushing the boundaries and being very in your face and just blatantly offensive a lot of the time. And as a teenager, I loved it, challenging dominant forms of representation. And also he was such a DIY producer before that was a term, making just bizarre work with very little money and then reaching a huge audience. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of fell into video and filmmaking through activism, and I remember very much being influenced as an undergrad one day when someone who became a good friend of mine, somebody just a little bit older, came into my class in media studies at Concordia with a bunch of videotapes from a local women's video distributor, Groupe Intervention Video Give, which is still around today. And that was kind of my entrance into artist-run culture. So I've been involved with Video In and Video Out in Vancouver, Cinevic here and MediaNet, Main Film, Give in Montreal. Kind of everywhere I go, I always connect with that scene, and also just like a parallel film festival circuit in the late 80s and 90s. I think I went to the first queer film festival that I'd been to, probably was 89. And, that was back in the day of everything being delivered in brown paper bags, and, the Little Sisters bookstore was in Court 25 years ago,
yes,
right? And in Montreal, what was the book, Androgyne? They used to get censored a lot too. It's just so crazy that border cops were, stopping the flow of these magazines and books and
Yeah.
deem them offensive.
Yeah.
It's just when I think about how much has changed in 30, 40
It
years.
just seems inconceivable today.
Yeah, like when I came out of the closet in the late 80s, it was just common knowledge that if you were, say, a woman and you came out and you had a kid, well, you would lose your child, you would lose custody, because the majority of judges would just think, well, you're unfit to be a mother, you're, a sexual deviant. And somehow now I'm married. I never thought that was a path I'd go down, or that I would be allowed to marry a woman and have a child.
Yeah.
And my name is on my daughter's birth certificate. It was quite early on, so she was born in 2009, and I didn't realize that was going to happen. And when it came in the mail, my partner and myself are on the birth certificate. Now I think you can get like 2, 3, 4 people on birth certificates. It's going to mess up the genealogists, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Confuse people.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
my mom was heavily into genealogy, and so I keep thinking, I wonder what she would think about all this. She met my daughter. So she passed away when she was a month short of 90, just when my daughter was 5, I guess. So I see these
Wow.
almost sort of crossings, I was the 5th child, and my mom was 42 when she had me, and my daughter was born when I was 42. So every day I feel these parallels of thinking, oh wow, so is this what my mom felt like? No, she had 4 other kids. And I remember when I hit puberty, which was not a fun time. For me, I didn't really want to.
Is it ever?
I don't think anybody really enjoys it, but I really didn't welcome it. I stopped eating, and I still, I don't know, I should do some deep Freudian work or something. What was that about?
Yeah.
I just stopped eating. And
For how long?
I don't know. I had to go see a pediatrician. And we would sit and talk, and I thought, oh my God, I must be crazy, because I wasn't eating much, and I just stopped doing anything. So, and then my mom was, of course, at some stage, post-menopause, menopause, whatever. My sister and I argue about it. She's like, no, she was long done menopause by the time you were 12. But I didn't welcome this. I didn't want to have a female body at the time. So I kind of wonder if that was part of it.
Yeah.
But also the hormones. I've heard from some people that, it just all goes away for some. And then you get to this even point. And I can't even remember if there was an even point when I was just a kid. I don't know. But anyhow, it's great to see my daughter, who is entering puberty at the same time, sort of starting in grade 4. And I'm seeing how slow a process it is. Because in my head, it's just like, I was a kid, and then I was a teenager, and it was awful, But it takes years for your body to change.
I just remember being thrown into an intense state of depression.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
just,
big depression at 12.
It was shocking.
Yeah, and so I keep
And my
thinking,
parents started treating me differently, and
I
they
know.
treated me like an invalid and took me on a special car trip and all these kinds of things. Just
what
when it
happened in the car trip?
Just to keep me, I don't know, just to kind of normalize things. And
Whoa.
wild, eh? Yeah.
That's interesting. So
Yeah.
why do you think you got depressed suddenly?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
It's curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen various doctors who just think the hormones
Yeah.
make me a bit loopy, and so I
Yeah.
keep thinking, oh, when they stop, I'll be like a normal kid again. That would be so great. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's funny, these life stages.
it is
And
curious.
I don't often talk to people about the stage of puberty and how we
Yeah.
all felt.
Well, and it's hard to remember, but you remember,
I remember it
really
clearly.
tangible details.
Yeah,
I do
yeah,
too. I have very
yeah.
clear memories of certain things. All the other stuff around it, I don't remember, but kind of the horror and the shock of having to go to talk to the pediatrician sounds like it was similar to your car trip.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I had to take iron supplements. And she said, why don't you sit down each night, sit with your mom and have a conversation and eat an apple.
Well, that'll help.
So my mom would sit down at the kitchen table and give me an apple and a glass of milk.
Yeah.
I'd It's like, oh, I guess if I can, eat that in a day, I won't die. But I don't know. It's curious. It's like there's the kind of the feminist part of me is thinking, was that just self-preservation? Did I have some kind of fear of what was to come in this pretty hostile culture we live in that wasn't particularly supportive of girls, and I didn't feel like a girl necessarily.
Yeah.
So that was kind of crappy.
Yeah.
I don't know what I wanted to happen at that stage. I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of ambivalence. And I think of your film, that the 2 for 1, and that moment where the revelation of the pregnancy, and I was profoundly moved by that. And maybe again, it's like that puberty experience where it's you have no say in the matter.
Right.
You're just suddenly enveloped in these biological processes over which you have no control.
So were you identifying with Adam then? Of like his whole life is just thrown into chaos?
I just felt that here someone doesn't want this.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, and they're plunged into this process, and they have no agency there.
You're not steering anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you do have agency, but then with that comes a lot of other complications.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was surprising to me. Oh, that's it. I was just telling somebody today, I said, well, when I go giving this talk at Concordia, I got invited to be a distinguished alumni, so
congratulations.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, what am I surprised at now that I never would have expected 30 years ago?
Yeah.
And I think one thing that surprises me, there's two. One is that I never thought I'd be teaching a class on Pixar to 250 students.
I saw that in the
and
calendar.
enjoying it.
I thought, that looks fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty fun, but
you
it's
do
not.
It next year too?
Yeah, I do it twice a year.
Starting in January.
Doing it again in January.
Great.
And it's like the intro to cultural studies, intro to film studies, intro to narrative structure, like the gateway drug. It's a fun class, but a class on cartoons, I never would have expected. And I tell them this joke at the beginning of the class. I say, I'm at the age where, it wasn't cool to watch animation when I was in my 20s, or cartoons, let's just say, the way it is now. And because there wasn't a lot of good content out there.
Yeah.
So I wasn't watching this kind of stuff, and I didn't grow up with it. I didn't really like those Disney films. I didn't find a way into Bambi or Wizard of Oz, though. I show it I tell them to watch it first day as like a blueprint for the kind of hero that you see in Pixar. Anyhow, we're not here to talk about Pixar, but it did surprise me.
Yet it does have a relevance.
Oh, it's huge.
Those life stages.
It
for
does.
Sure.
And so many of them.
Formative.
We're watching Up next week, and my sister, who doesn't have children, she's 11 years older than me, but she has dogs. And when we watched Up for me the third or fourth time, I love that film, and I didn't realize Ed Asner was the voice of the old man. And of course, I grew up watching Mary Tyler Moore as a little kid with my family sitting around the TV.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, Ed Asner, he's so amazing. And he's in some Netflix series recently. Anyhow, so I sent it to my sister and I said, I'm just sending you this film. I bought it. It's yours. You got to watch it. It's so good. Anyhow, so I was chatting with my thesis advisor from UBC, showing her a film a little bit after I'd graduated. And I said, I'm just kind of stuck with it. It's not working. So she watches it and she says, yeah, I think you got some structure issues. You should watch Finding Nemo.
Oh.
And I thought, what? You want me to watch a cartoon? This is a serious film.
Yeah.
This is a film about domestic abuse. You want me to watch a film about a fish? And then, of course, I watched the film and I'm like, whoa, that's a very well-written movie. So it's utterly surprising to me that I'm teaching this huge university course on cartoons. But it's fun. I love it. And it kind of gets me through the week. And I think, I just do my lecture and then I can watch Up or WALL-E or Inside Out, and I can sit in this dark room and cry. And then I have to get up and talk to the students. We watched Coco the other day, and I'm like sobbing at the end of the film, when little Miguel plays the song. Yeah. And of course, I had a mom with dementia, so that film was just so smart. How many layers that it hits, about memory and remembering and the music.
Yeah.
Because this is, of course, a thing that I just figured out toward the end of my mom's life, I wish I'd known it sooner, all this research coming out about how somehow the musical memory stays more intact.
Oh, that's interesting.
So one of the last times I saw my
interesting.
mom at this nursing home in Montreal, I went in and I waved and she recognized me-ish, you know, and she said, wow, the resemblance is uncanny. And I thought, wow, I wonder who she sees. You know, is it her sister, her daughter, I don't know, herself, her mother? I don't know who she saw. So I just said, yeah, well, of course it is. And there was music playing, and she starts singing this song. I never knew she even knew this song. I can't remember what it was. It was some kind of country-ish song. And I thought, how do you know this song? I've never heard you sing it or play it. And I thought, wow, I wish I'd kind of known that more, then I would have had more music around.
Yes.
And playing my guitar more, visiting her, that kind of thing.
And singing.
My
mom has Alzheimer's, and she's going to be 90 in March.
Wow.
And she has a twin sister as well who has Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
But she recited a poem, 2 or 3 poems that she'd written at a family event at Thanksgiving to the whole gang of us.
Isn't that uncanny?
Recited it. And she kept saying to us, I'm a twin. I'm a twin. Now, she sort of remembers who we are, but she asks you the same question repeatedly. And she doesn't have much memory of most things, but it's very interesting what she does remember. She's a twin, and those poems.
Wow.
And I do say to her, Mom, you can't disown me because we look exactly alike. You can't say I'm not related to you because we look so much alike. So just thinking of your mom saying, you know, I recognize
the resemblance is
uncanny.
Yeah, because I'm your kid.
You can deny that you don't know me, but
I look like your other kid. I look like your husband. I look like your sons. So the other thing that I think I will tell them that I'm surprised that I did not think 30 years ago I'd be doing is to make a feature film that we build as a romantic comedy.
Yes.
So bizarre.
Yeah.
So
tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. If you told me 25, 30 years ago that I would make a romantic comedy, I would have laughed. But I mean, I guess it is a romantic comedy, but the irony too is when I teach screenwriting, I always tell the students what the cliches are and how you can write the breakup story, the unexpected pregnancy story, the suicide story. These are common, they're every day, but you have to find a way not to make them cliche. And I would get the scripts, I'm like, oh no, it's another unexpected pregnancy. Oh no, it's another breakup. And it's like, okay, but these happen to everybody every day. Somewhere's getting pregnant, you know, somebody's getting pregnant right now, you know.
They do.
And I never found those stories interesting because I never wanted to be pregnant, and I fortunately wasn't. I found someone else who would do that. So it was hilarious that I wrote the story about a transgender man who accidentally gets pregnant, and part of it came from just the funny experience of artificial insemination and all the kind of gags that came out of that. But you know, our story wasn't that interesting. And I was reading a book when my partner was trying to get pregnant called Lesbian Conception, Birth, and it was a long title, by a midwife, lesbian conception, birth, and something. Anyhow, a midwife from San Francisco. And she actually had a whole chapter on trans pregnancy, but the publisher apparently took it out. And there was just this line, like a throwaway line, if your partner is helping you and things get, you know, intense, just be careful what you do with the sperm, you know? It's like the toilet seat thing. So, and I talked to this guy, Leland, who ran the big sperm bank in San Francisco, the first one, just before he retired, and I told him the premise of the story, and I wanted to ask a few questions. Did some research with him. And he knew of a couple of these accidental trans or lesbian pregnancies where the wrong person got pregnant. He's like, whoa, watch what you do. Like, don't get it on your hands, and then put your hands in the wrong place. And so, exactly, that's hilarious, right?
Hilarious.
So I wanted to make something that had drama and comedy and, you know, all the best parts of it. Like, I believe it was Carol Burnett said, comedy is tragedy plus time. And so there's the pathos, but then you have to laugh. And so my early work was really earnest and angry and, activist, which is great. But I think that there's a greater subversive activism in a film like 2 for 1. It's not divine in John Waters, but there's still, that humor was so critical to me. 1, as a survival strategy, but 2, as a way in, because I learned over 25 years or so that if I want to change the world, I'm not going to do it very effectively by yelling at people. That if I can make them laugh, then they'll listen. So when you laugh, you're open and you're receptive.
Yeah.
So I think comedy can be surprisingly effective in changing people's minds.
Yeah.
And I was at one screening in particular where these, strangers come up and they start talking to you. And this one young person, maybe 19, 18, 17, was there with her grandmother who was in her 80s. And they both came and said, "Oh my God, we just love this movie." And I thought, okay, that's success.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
You've got the generations right there.
Yeah.
Intergenerational, yeah.
But if I made some, an activist video yelling and screaming, I don't think the grandmother would have listened to it. But she got sucked up in the love story.
Yeah. It was such a human story.
Yeah.
We laughed our heads off.
Yeah.
And it was very affecting to us. I said,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and amazing actors, they really conveyed it.
I do like romantic comedies.
Yeah, and I actually just watched Legally Blonde with my daughter.
Oh, there you go.
Although, she winds up with the lawyer in the end. Yeah. I mean, it has a romantic thread, but I wouldn't. I guess it is a rom-com.
Yeah. I have friends who refuse to watch them.
I know.
Absolutely refuse.
But some of them are hilarious. Like Bridget Jones' Diary. Come on, that's a great movie. Legally Blonde. It's really fun.
Yeah. Bridesmaids.
Bridesmaids is so great.
So funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 2 for 1.
There you go. Yeah.
Very funny.
Yeah. Not what I expected to be doing, but it was such a great experience to work with such talented actors.
Yeah.
The actress who plays the mom, I wrote her as a Quebecoise woman, and then I couldn't find a local actor who would.
She was good.
She was amazing. Gabrielle Rose, she's like Canada's Meryl Streep, and so underappreciated. And I wrote it with this Quebecoise mom who would throw in these turns of phrase in French. Spoke English, but would have these little moments of "oh ma petite crotte," or and she played with the gender. So unfortunately I lost that when I had to change the character because I couldn't. There weren't any actresses around who could pull it off, and I couldn't afford to fly someone from Quebec. Anyhow, Gabrielle read the script, and I said, "I've got this dilemma though. I don't know what to do with the fact that she's this French speaker, and we're shooting in 2 weeks, and you're a great actor, but I can't imagine you're going to nail that accent in 2 weeks. It's not going to happen." And she said, "I have an idea." She's learning French because she's afraid of losing her memory. And as you get older, for your neurodiversity, I'm like, I'm playing the piano for that very reason.
Yeah.
And she said, you totally got me. And she just added this layer of subtext. It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
So she's learning French, and she's doing it badly. Yeah. And then it adds this level of humor. And I didn't actually have to change the script.
Yeah.
It was really, really brilliant.
Yeah.
And so talented. And I just love how she's just all about getting the grandkid. And then poor Adam is like, I am not, men don't get pregnant. I don't want a baby. Yeah, it was a good time.
Well, what are you working on now?
Let me see. What can I talk about that actually has some relevance? There's a couple of projects that I'm not doing that I should be doing. Well, in the spring, I'm going to be going to South Africa and then Jordan, shooting in Sauk Nation, and then going to Colombia with Elizabeth Vibert, who teaches in history. Yeah. And she got a big Shirk project for a very large group project called 4 Stories About Food Sovereignty. Oh. So again, a way of doing activism about the climate crisis, and subverting the paradigm of the kind of global north researcher going and telling people what to do. So Elizabeth set it up in this brilliant way where she brought together these farmers in different communities, in these 4 communities, and has said, what are the issues? What do you want us to say?
Oh,
How do you want
nice.
us to portray your story?
Nice.
And so
Nice.
there's a lot of drought everywhere. So every single community is dealing with a lack of water. So that'll be really quite something. And so it'll be a documentary.
Oh,
And
that's great.
yeah, I haven't traveled that far afield, so
Yeah.
that'll be really thrilling. And I'm working on a script right now that came to me from an old childhood friend, one of my best friends when I was little, and a great war historian, David O'Keefe. And he had a great relationship with my dad, who fought in World War II. And then David was also in the Black Watch for a period of time, and then he became a historian, and he wrote an amazing book called One Day in August about Dieppe, kind of cracking the code of Dieppe, what happened, and he's figured all this out with declassified documents. So I saw him a couple of years ago in Montreal, and I said, you know, it's not my genre or style really, because it's so expensive. I mean, Juno Beach,
Yeah.
you know, like, battle scenes is not kind of what I do. I shoot contemporary things that I can afford to do with no budget. And I said, but you know, has anybody adapted it to the screen? And he said, yes, it was optioned, but I have an even better story. So he told me this other story he's got, again through declassified documents, about a Canadian airman who was a German spy, and he brought down a Lancaster and killed 5, 6 other Canadians.
My God.
And faked his death a number of times, married a woman in England. You know, they met, 3 months later they were married, and then apparently he was dead. But she got some communication from him in POW camps, and then he disappeared. But he was in East Germany, and then he sent her a letter and said, I'm in East Berlin, I want to see you, and I still love you, come and visit me. And so she heads out with, so what happened was she went to the pension office and said, well, my husband's not dead, I got this letter from him. And so she goes to see him with these pension officers, but they're not, they're like MI5 agents. And he was already known to the Canadian government, and they had basically written him off. They changed his status to never having served, because if they'd brought him back to Canada, he would have been tried for treason. And it was terribly embarrassing to the Canadian government, the British government, and there were cover-ups. Lester B. Pearson, John Diefenbaker were all part of successive governments that tried to kind of brush his story away. So I'm writing it thinking, you know, it's kind of a tribute to my dad, and this friendship that I've had for many decades, and it's just a great story, and it's very Canadian, but it's a universal story of betrayal and not knowing. You know, this woman just didn't know who was her husband, and he was from a small town in Manitoba.
That's a great story.
So I'm telling it from her perspective, Ivy, and there's not a lot of war stories told from a female POV. So I just got to write it. And, you know, I'm writing it not thinking about filming it, but it's scalable. There's no battle scenes, you know, so it could be done with a modest budget, although it would be period, mostly in Britain. But that'd be a blast.
Yeah, yeah.
Need a little bit more than what I shot 2 for 1 for $170,000. So we need a little bit more than that to shoot a period piece. But yeah, so I'm just taking a little bit more time, thinking about it. And
yeah. So thank you, Maureen, so much for joining me today in this beautiful garden setting. I really appreciate you being part of the Life Stories conversations.
My pleasure. It's great to have a conversation about real things.
Real things.
Kind of drop out of the busyness of daily life, step away from social media.
Yeah.
And have a real conversation.
Yeah. Reflect on our lives.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.